Hello, David McMillan here, and this is introducing part 8 of the series of long form interviews I did with Shaun Attwood. Where are we with that one? Well, you might be sick of it, but it's in depth, so a bit more of inside Karachi Central Jail, how to live with it. You know, somebody awful and famous once said, you can judge something of a country by looking at their prisons or how they treat their prisoners. Well, really, Karachi Central Jail was all of Pakistan in miniature. It had a ruling elite. It had a corrupt underbelly. And it had the survivors. Some of the people we'll meet, they were survivors. I was one. I've cut off the front of this because the beginning of the interview is extremely stupid with some big joke glasses. Sometimes I think Shaun just drags me into the studio and kind of dozes off while I rabbit on. Yeah, I have to kick him sometimes to get him to ask a question. Or is that him kicking me to tell me to stop? Well, I'll stop now and get on with Part 8 of the long-form interviews. Themes is to do with picking up the ransom money from kidnappings. And you'll be able to see that on my channel probably before you actually see this. But Shaun might put it on his, you never know. But it did raise one important issue for people who are thinking of getting up to mischief, not that we encourage it. But if the person you're either robbing or doing harm to, and in a kidnapping it's the family, rich dad or whatever, the richer they are, the worse it's going to get for you. Now, I think most people would probably guess that anyway, but not to the extent. The one I'll be talking about is was a kidnapping that was to take place in well, the victim was going to be taken to Lebanon. But I did point out that because the father of this young man was media magnate Rupert Murdoch, yeah, sure, he probably wouldn't blink at paying the 15 million, but he'd probably offer 50 for the heads of those who'd done it. Now, here's what I'm getting at. If there's enough money involved, if there's huge sums, every scoundrel in those 5 continents that you referred to will come out of the woodwork, and by one means or another, they will say they've earned their money and brought the kidnappers to justice. They will be not just ruthless, but they will even manufacture kidnappers. They'll produce dead bodies with littered evidence that, yes, this is their hideout and so on. Taking on such a huge target does mean you will never have any peace. I think Howard Hughes used to keep a staff on all the time to deal with people that offended him. And you don't hear their stories, which is even more worrying than having heard them, because I guess they couldn't tell them. But still. So, Shaun, you've been keeping busy with Epstein, but where we are here today, it doesn't really matter when I say that you've been keeping busy with Epstein, because if this doesn't go to air for a year, you'll probably still be busy with him. A dead man can live on.
The story that keeps running, Epstein, Prince Andrew.
I know it does. But today we're going to plunge into Pakistan, particularly Karachi Central Jail, a famous location for locals because a lot of politicians, well, they call themselves activists, but really criminal gangs masquerading as political groups, and rich people have all been in there. Including Benazir Bhutto, the daughter of Ali Bhutto. And she was, Prime Minister off and on a couple of times before she died, wasn't she?
Benazir Bhutto.
Yeah.
So Benazir Bhutto was incarcerated.
Yes, she was locked up there in the women's section. But they, when you're in there, you can go and visit the women's section. Yeah, which I'll come to.
And just to recap for people who are new to this, then, why are you in this prison in this particular moment of your story?
Okay, let's imagine that we're descending from outer space, and like Neil Armstrong trying to find a safe place to land on the moon, you're looking for somewhere friendly, and by chance you go over Karachi with its 17 million, I think, people sprawling out, and you'll see a big rectangle down there, and it looks safe to land because it's a bit of open space, but it's not. It's one of the most notorious prisons where routinely when the middle class people get arrested and brought in, they go straight to the torture ward. It's called the Bund ward. Bund meaning closed. It's closed, all right, but you can hear it from outside.
What's the preferred methods of torture?
I ended up in there, and I'll tell you why shortly, or eventually. Start off easy, just handcuffed around the clock behind your back. You have to make your own toilet arrangements like that. These guys kindly, held my pants in place while I squatted, and there's a bit of protocol, you turn away at that moment. But leg spreaders, which are long bars of iron with manacles either end, so that now you think this is a bit odd, but is it painful? It is after some time, and you spend days like that, not being able to walk. Fetters, they call them. And then when that softening up's done, it's straight in with the leather belts. And so the next communication that the poor slob has with his family is screaming for money, they're going to kill me. They won't, but they'll get as close as they can. But anyway, your point was, what was I doing there in general? I were just over 40, I think 41 years old, since the age of 20, being involved in smuggling. I found myself locked up in different places, from a Supermax prison in Australia, which only held 48, Shaun, but there were 35 deaths a year for its 48 inmates. Now, they did close it in the end. Those figures spoke for themselves. Then to a Thai prison, where I was about to be sentenced to death and had no real alternative than escape, which luckily I did, because I didn't realize how big the damn place was. And then, having got away through Singapore and then into Pakistan and safe into the care of my old friend from my very early days, when my wife and I tried to take our own version of the Silk Road across, starting out right. Really, actually, we were more retracing Alexander the Great's footsteps. We had 3 big mobile homes and musicians, and I think our soap maker came along or something like that. But it was quite a big caravan. So I admit Mir, his lordship, Nur John Magsy, all those years ago. He was in jail at the time and had called me over about his cousin who'd been kidnapped. Kidnapping's coming up a bit today, but kidnapping there is very routine. It's not. It's very rarely somebody jumping out of a van in the street, but it's mostly inviting you around and just not letting you go. So as in the previous, well, I think part 5 or 6, I'd spoken about having to buy back little Iftikhar, the kidnapped boy, which I bought along with some antiquities which were being looted by, well, they were sort of pre-Taliban people, but there were lots of those. So over this career of darkness, I've ended up in big prisons from time to time. I've lost everything and regained things, but of course the things I can't get again. And my wife was killed in a prison fire. There's no turning back death. And to find myself arrested in Karachi, mysteriously too. I wasn't really up to anything. But those are the dangerous times, Shaun, when because you know everybody. Oh, yes, David was involved too. Of course, it doesn't take much. And what made it worse was that the arresting officer, who was quite senior in the anti-narcotics force in Karachi, had got into his head that I was some huge mafia figure. I had tentacles everywhere. A courier had been picked up who said that I'd owed him money from gambling in the Philippines, and he was under threat. He had to do it. And oh, it doesn't matter what. Look, if you try anything with David, he'll have you killed. He's got assassins everywhere. Mm-hmm. Well, this guy who had been had American DEA training took that personally, and he was a kind of upper class Karachiite. The rich people there often like to get their kids government jobs, because even if they never go into the office, they have a job for life. So that's the kind of starting point. And official jobs, including higher-ups in police forces, are good to have. So this was a well-spoken but huge guy called Ahmed Baboosh. That was his name. Baboosh, yes, it stayed with me. That was his introduction to me. And I was plucked under unusual circumstances. My picture was stuck on the wall at Lahore airport, whisked my plane down to Karachi. I saw the gloating face of my old nemesis, Bill Shankman from the USDA. Old Bill used to make it his business to try and make things interesting for my life. And once again, I saw the life that I'd rebuilt here in London just crumble away. I had a girl in my life who knew nothing at all of what I'd been up to. I had a little Muse house down in Chelsea. You know, I just remembered, if somebody's got that house, if they go up the stairs, there's one of these plugs on the wall. You know, they used to make little stashes out of them. You put a special key and it opens up. If you feel you're in, well, I won't name the street, but if you have a little one-bedroom Muse house with nice skylights in there, and a PowerPoint halfway up the stairs, there could be that £2,000 still stuck behind that.
Would that be in old notes?
It would be. So you'd have to take it to a money collector.
Can you still do that? Wasn't the purpose of changing the notes to thwart people who've got money stashed?
I suppose it to force them to try and bring it out. But really, I mean, they do that in India a lot. They've done that 5 times. They've virtually overnight said, oh, as of Monday, the 5,000 rupee note won't be legal tender anymore. They don't replace it with another one. They just say, no, we're going to have low notes. Because
you've got these guys in America and Central and South America as well that happens, and they're in prison. So they send guys out to dig the money up then, and the money gets robbed.
Yeah, surprise, surprise. Yeah, what are you doing, Pedro? Oh, I'm just going out a bit of digging in Arizona. You know the thing. Oh, really? Yeah, well, I'm off for the weekend too. Something just came up.
Just to say one thing. Bill Schenkman, is that his name?
Yeah.
Bill Schenkman, DEA agent, is a reoccurring theme in David's books. And I love how David ends his book. Is it Escape or Unforgiving
No, it'd be
Destiny?
Unforgiving Destiny.
In Unforgiving Destiny, how there's a moment, I'm not going to spoil it, but at the end there's a Schenkman moment, and it's very delightful to read.
Well, of course, here...
links to his books in the description box below this.
That's under Show More, by the way. You click on that and things happen.
Or if you're on your phone, there's a little down arrow.
There's probably lots of arrows on a phone. But you've got a point. Bill was, of course, my nemesis. But the greatest disappointment, apart from being hounded and destroyed a few times by him, was that he never had any good lines for me. He would be there and he was there in Karachi that time. He was there in Bangkok in the Chinatown police station. And I think by the time I got used to seeing him, I'd say, well, Bill, I see you're here, which explains a few things. He got justification for his interest because, unknown to me, one step removed from me was Tommy from Thailand, whose uncle had rather foolishly kidnapped the wife of a DEA agent. It was meant to drive her around town and drop her off and give the agent a scare, stop him from roaming around on the farmlands, annoying the opium farmers and so on. But it all went wrong, and the car stalled at traffic lights, and the kidnapper's there with a revolver with a trigger tied with wire and his thumb on it. So, well, you can't shoot me because she'll go. And then, oops, I slipped. So, you know from, what's his name? Kiki Camarena. Now, he was American agent, wasn't he?
DEA agent, yeah, from Cali, Mexico.
Now, how did the Americans take his torture and death? Well,
there was a mixed reaction. So you've got people, top brass people, and government officials in America kind of like saying, you know, that's what happens to people who are on the front line, no big deal. But then you got the DEA saying this is, you can't kill a US citizen on foreign soil. This is not allowed to happen. So America's got to have this huge reaction now to find out what's actually happened here and bring people to justice. But there was, because the CIA were involved in smuggling cocaine around that time and all this other stuff, there was all these conflicts going on.
Purified as some American innocent abroad being killed.
Kiki Camarena, he realized that if he just kept arresting people and just posing for a picture with some coke and a dealer, it would make no change to the world. So he went above his pay level and he started to look at where the money was going. And that money was going to top government officials. Some of it was financing a war in Nicaragua, Americans fighting the communists. So once he went after those people, he was supposed to be kidnapped and warned off, but the kidnappers went too far.
Well, yeah, certainly did. But the point is there, isn't it, that the US do have a policy of, and it's a sensible one, of hunting down and destroying anybody who harms in general a US citizen, but particularly an official.
Yeah.
So when you end up, as I did by proxy, as it were, on the list of people who were to be destroyed, people didn't argue with Bill if he'd say, oh, I'm looking at McMillan's latest thing or whatever it might be, even though there was no US connection. I've known a few kind of mobsters and interesting people over there, but always resisted doing business because I could never really get the feel for, even when I was in New York, I got a better idea there, but once you keep going further and further west, the people get flakier and stranger. And in Los Angeles, they struck me as very much kind of Hollywoodish in that they were kind of acting everything. So I couldn't judge if somebody was an informer or a double agent. And my friends had also, my English friends had said that, look, be careful there, because in most circumstances, as soon as somebody gets arrested, they'll say to the police, all right, what's the deal here? Who do you want? I'll serve them up on a platter with trimmings.
I was lucky because in Arizona, I built a scene from the ground up with all the local people. So everyone knew everyone. So if anyone came in from the outside, we knew right away. And even when they submitted the request for wiretaps to the judge, they said, whenever we send undercover cops to these people,
they stand out.
They always come in, we're from out of state, we want to buy some pills. It was so obvious.
Right. Yeah.
And I mentioned Kiki Camarena. If you are interested in his full story, my new book just got published. It's 4 stories that intertwine. Kiki Camarena's is one of them. It goes way beyond what Narcos Mexico has said about Kiki Camarena. There's so much more to it than that. Anyway, that's available worldwide on Amazon now. It is Clinton, Bush, and CIA Conspiracies is the subtitle, from the boys on the track to, surprise, surprise, Jeffrey Epstein.
Oh, don't tell me he gets in there.
He's in there.
Oh, well, that's a very long title, but I'm sure people will work it out. All you have to really know is Shaun Attwood. That's the name to remember.
Put that in Amazon, 13 books will come up.
Yeah, spring to life they do. So, before I get totally lost here, this Karachi arrest was worse than the Thailand one. The place, it wasn't a matter of, my normal approach, Shaun, is, okay, arrested, start looking around, what bars can be cut, is there anybody I can manipulate to open a door for me? Do I have to convince anybody of anything here? What are the physical barriers? None of that applied. And here's why it's so hard to describe there, because it is really, for me anyway, totally alien. It took me so long to become not as one with the people there, but at least to have some understanding. When I was, of course, my Thai escape came up, and so I had slightly worse treatment when I arrived at the jail anyway. But, and this is a jail where people don't even go to court. They've got to pay to get on the court list. They've got to pay the drivers. They've got to pay, when they get to the court, they've got to pay to get out of the van. They've got to pay to go and see. Yeah, they've even got to tip the guard so I can see the clerk, so that I can pay the clerk to get before the judge. So there's things to know here. This is not.
Are they allowed to carry money around to do those tips?
Oh, yes, they ignore all that. But I did make a mistake once coming back from court. I had a wad of money there, and I should have tipped the guard there, but he felt it. And I wasn't quick enough giving him a 500. Well, it looked like too much for that, so he made a nuisance of himself and then extended the list of people that I had to pay off by saying, well, we'll put it on in the safe upstairs. You can imagine. Yeah, really safe. Has that word got any relevance to where it's going? So, yes, the short answer is that. And also, if you're it's a class system, A, B, and C. A is political, B is rich people, or what do they call it? People accustomed to a better lifestyle. That's actually written in the law, would you believe it? Accustomed to a better lifestyle. And C, which is just the dregs. They're the people that never get out of the dormitories. There's hundreds of people in there. If they're lucky, they get their lentil and pita bread on a bit of old newspaper, but that formality is not always adhered to. So there, you would need money because somebody went out and to do the shopping every day. The original, they used to call, it was named Chandio. Now, like just to give you an idea of how old this institution is and its traditions. The original Chandio went back to 1948, but every guard who got the job as doing the shopping used to take the name Chandio. He did a wide range of things. You used to give him a little bit of a tip he used to go to the pharmacy as well. You used to write your own prescriptions out, and whatever you could get, he'd get them for you. He also did the shopping for the high end. I'll just put this a bit back into sequence because I don't want people getting as lost as I was when I first went in there. So I won't go over the torture thing again, but you can catch it before. I'm more or less, after £5,000, I'm kind of left alone. But I go out to the prison. I don't know quite who my informer is, but it's supposedly a courier. And I think, well, I haven't been anything to do with the business for at least a few months. There was a guy who wanted a retirement plan, not that kind of retirement plan. And he was meant to be organising some couriers, but this Billy Green, an ex-boxer from Liverpool, he was living in the Philippines. I can't see. Well, I'm speculating about this, and they've put me in the jail and sent me over to the MQM party's headquarters. Within the prison, all the political groups, MQM was a Karachi-based independence movement. And of course, a lot of them are in prison, mostly for things that are nothing more than looting and kidnapping, and so on. But they say it's all political. Anyway, I suppose it is in a sense. Politics of greed. And I was made quite comfortable there. Their English speakers gave me a room to myself. And then there was a little scraping at the door as I was finishing off some food they'd brought me. This is other prisoners, of course. Oh, we found a friend for you. We found an Englishman. Yeah, okay. And who's led into the thing but this great steaming, quivering lump of jelly? Yes, the venerable Billy Green himself. He was the courier. And why? Because Billy didn't want to pay the couriers. He thought he'd do it all himself, like 5 kilos or something, and did it all wrong. And then he could pocket the money. And what was the solution when he got caught? Blame it all on me. And viewers, 3 months before this, I'm at South Kensington on Dina's restaurant saying, Billy, look, I've just given you 12 grand. If that's not enough, surely that'll last you I mean, what had he done for me? He got me a few passports, nothing much really. But he was the kind of guy that always remembers things. You know, the truly stupid have got a photographic memory for anything that looks like useful detail. He didn't go to the Muse house, but he went to the flat around the corner, soaked it up like a sponge, everything that was written down there, and then it all regurgitated back out. Not to mention, and you might wonder why he'd done this, because I explicitly told him when to travel, you do not take your photo album with you. You don't take your address book. This is how to code telephone numbers. And I could tell I was wasting my time. You know, the coding system for telephone numbers is you find a 10-letter word or phrase and just substitute the letters. For example, frozen days, easy to remember, F-R-O-Z. F is 1 and S is 0. The letters don't repeat, so you just have to tell somebody PTLO, whatever. Once when we were being under surveillance and every telephone line was tapped, Michael, my old partner, had to make up something that would make it not sound like code. As in, yeah, David, I was at this party last night. Freddie was there, and so was Olivia. And I'm thinking, what the hell? And I started to realize I have to write down the names because it's the first letter of the names he's giving me, which is the letters for the new telephone number I have to call him on. But these kind of subtleties are wasted on the Billy Greens of this world. And I can imagine, I pictured him there at customs, suddenly having a full-on heart attack. And they're experienced people there. They just would have pulled him over. And did they have to ask him, do you have anything to declare? It was more like, I was told, it's in the case and it's not mine. I've got nothing to do with it. I had to do it. He even took one of the best concealment things that Christian, the Danish guy, had ever asked me to build, which was an architect's drawing board. And white resin plastic, had been poured all over thin layers of dope. And then all the little slidey bits, a bit like the Anglepoise thing on this, were over the drawing board, along with sketches and things like that. Customs didn't touch that. They didn't. They picked it up, of course, tapped it, solid as a rock, put it aside. What does Billy do? There's more in there. Now, what kind of level of cowardice are we trying to rate here on a scale of 11 plus? Because the only reason he would say that, I imagine, viewers can comment differently, why would he tell them something he didn't have? He was so scared that if they later on found it, they'd come back to him and flick him with a wet towel because he hadn't said, there's also some there. They didn't want to know. It took them apparently 2 hours to get into the thing. One of them was sweating, well pissed that he'd even mentioned it. A nice phonied up suitcase there. Just tear it out, put it on the scales. That's it. Share it out later when the accused is gone. Some of those things get recycled very many times.
Oh, I can imagine. It's too valuable to throw away.
Oh, yeah. And it can be used to set up somebody who's worked for you a few times. They're quite ruthless there.
Yeah.
So this was to be my cellmate as well.
Didn't he earn a nickname from this?
Oh, well, he wanted his own new passport, and he chose the name William Power.
Willpower.
Exactly. I didn't even realize what it meant. People do that. I had a courier once who was known as the Lollipop Man because he looked like one of those guys that let the kids cross the road at a zebra crossing. And I said, what name do you want your passport in? Roland. I said, what, family name, nickname, something? No, I just like the name. Last name, Wynn, W-I-N-N. Okay. And it wasn't till later that, knowing he was an inveterate gambler, that I realized it was a dice thing. Roll and win. Roll the dice and win. Yeah. Well, he didn't always, but he actually was quite sensible and did retire. Actually, and one of the only people to, or few anyway, to bring me money after I was arrested once. Not many of those. So he retired well. Now, the next morning, an American comes in called Mason, and his accent was from East Coast. Lived on a place called Egg Island or something. But it's up in Great Gatsby territory. So he's wandering around the jail. I know nothing about it, but he tells me he's offering real estate, prime real estate. He is, in fact, an agent that morning for the deputy governor of the prison. And I can picture the scene later because when Mason went, the deputy governor said the same thing to me. Yeah, rich foreigners have come in. Go get them. They're worth 25,000. For some reason, that must be a lucky number there because they're always saying it. It doesn't mean anything. Oh, US dollar. Yeah. So I don't know why I'm using a Mexican accent for that. It doesn't really belong there. It just seems, venality seems to go with that accent, doesn't it? Well, I said to Mason, "Does this accommodation, what is it?" "Well, you have your own room, but by myself." "Yes, I'll pay it." Just to get away from Billy Green. "Do you want him? Pay for him too?" Billy's looking up at me. Don't abandon me. I know how you ratted you. He said, I thought, Dave, it didn't matter because I didn't even know you were in the country. Well, that's fair enough, isn't it, Shaun? I mean, if, say, you left Arizona for a couple of days to come back to the UK, somebody got in trouble and finked you out completely from, arsehole to breakfast, as they used to say in Australia, then that's fair, isn't it? No, Billy, I said that wasn't very helpful. And what about your address book? Well, the look on his face said, no, I cleared up any ambiguities there that they couldn't understand. So burnt, the Muse house burnt. The 2 flats in Earl's Court burnt. Luckily, I mean, I'm not that stupid. He didn't know the safety deposit boxes or the codes to things. But I'd taken a lot of precautions before I left London. I even took my house keys and thinking on the basis, the more precautions you take, the less you're likely to need them. I took my house keys and left them by the drain pipe just outside, which came in handy later on. So I was prepared for the worst, but the place I could have had the worst across the border in Afghanistan never happened. I suppose because there's not really meddlesome officials there that can't be shot, I suppose. Anyway, so I took I stumped up the money for that. It was all services. Well, I have to call somebody. Mobile phone. Looking at it, slightly worn out, 00 or the plus sign. So many people before me had to call foreign countries to get themselves out of trouble. And I went to B class, which was a row of little, well, there were still cells, but they never locked them except late at night. And we had a bed because everybody else slept on the floor. A little bathroom, privacy. You can't get that in many Eastern prisons. You can't get it in Western ones. That lack of privacy was so great, I've noticed, and people yearn for it so much. When I was in Thailand, an old guy who ran a kind of shell polishing a little factoryette that he could lock, because there were valuable polished shells in there. He used to rent it out for 15 minutes to boys who wanted a bit of privacy so they could do their own shell polishing, I guess. Anyway, but it was good to have that. And the guy came in from the shops and I met the chairman, Usman Faruqi, chairman of Pakistan Steel, who was in on corruption charges, a couple of government ministers, and but all the politicians had their own zones, but we'll meet them later. I was just looking at scratched out a list as I was fixing a flat this morning. There was Benazir Bhutto's PPP party, the Sindhi Nationalist, the Baruchi Independence Movement, and the Bhutto clan. They're such one of the big 22 families of Pakistan, their nobility, such that the children became political leaders even before Benazir was assassinated. She was blown up, I think, in Clifton, one of the suburbs of Karachi, by who knows who, but her husband, Mr. 10%, got arrested for it, and he was in at the time. That's right, that must have been just about that time. But this is 1999, so I think that came later. But I think he was there on some other corruption charges. But he had his own house, but it was one that the prison had built for VIPs. And he had to pay for it, of course. There was rent on that. But his cook used to say he was a mean bastard and never helped. Now, you get servants with this. The servants are prisoners, and the prisoners have to pay the guards to get the job. If you're a prisoner who's got nothing, you are not going anywhere. You can't even get to court. If you are the badashi, the servant of a moneyed person, the protocol is that after 6 months you have your servant freed. Well, the soon-to-be president of Pakistan never freed. Now, maybe he liked the Bangladeshis cooking. Could have been that issue. I don't know. But I ended up with Bossai, who'd had a kind of scrambled egg eye on one side from a discussion with the police when he was arrested. And some fat half-wit kid who was the Dobiwala who did my washing. And in fact, I stuck to that protocol. I did get him released about 6 months later. But I'm saying this in a kind of a very straightforward manner, listing the steps taken. But bear in mind that I'm 41. I've been through a 10-year stretch in Australia, which was very nightmarish in the beginning, with people being covered with contact glue and set alight and burning to death. And somehow, strangely worse than that, the sounds of people being beaten and chained, especially the young girls they had in that prison, by psychotic guards at night, and you can do nothing about it. Having that life taken away, and then building up another one after getting out of Thailand. And for a while I was a London gentleman. I had my own driver, Domingo, and I really didn't do anything. I was like a Victorian gentleman, just visited galleries and I met at some good cause or other I was putting money into, not to expiate my former sins. I don't feel that any amount of money would sort that out. But
was being a London gentleman boring for you?
No, I actually really liked it. I'd get up in the morning. I belonged to the local Holmes Place, was it? The gym down there in Kensington. Pastry shop was very good, French. I'd meet friends for lunch, catch up on... I saw my first IMAX film, I think, back then. Just things I'd never got around to. But I suppose you've got a point about whether it was boredom, because sometimes things would come up and I'd be sitting there thinking, yes, TB, you say that can't be done, but let's not be hasty here. And or some friend would want something arranged, and I'd make the introduction. And, a bit like an old cook who can't stand to see anybody else in the kitchen. I'd introduce these people together, and instead of going back home, I'd be saying, well, look, you can't do it that way. Here, give me that thing, and I'd be involved in stuff. I mean, going back to Pakistan in the first place was a bit of madness, really.
Don't you still get the call of the wild these days?
Not really. Oddly enough, no. Mortality is knocking at the door. Okay, if somebody came up with a good plan to steal the former Shah of Iran's royal jewels, well, who could resist that, eh, Shaun? You'd be in on it, wouldn't you? Come on.
Well, not kidnapping his son.
Oh, the Shah's son? No. Oh, no. Kidnapping is a terrible thing. You know what's terrible about it? There's no deal. You're not giving anybody anything that they hadn't already got. You're just depriving them of something. And not only that, how can you call yourself a reasonable sort of professional criminal and then jail somebody? Become a jailer yourself? All right, the kidnappers are just desperados. That's why I had to really convince these Lebanese that this way. I think it would have been a disaster, because they just weren't savvy enough for it, and they they certainly wouldn't have ended up with the money. Lots of people would have ended up with lots of money, but not them. No, there's the Shah's jewelry has disappeared into the vaults of the Ayatollah's palaces. I suppose when you've got dictators, you end up with another kind, don't you, when you get rid of the former one? Whereas the previous Shah was a modernist. He was even going to get Concorde. I saw one done up in Iranian Airways livery, but it was never delivered because he went quite early. They never recover, those dictators. They always die in Paris or Khartoum or something afterwards. And they often don't have much to say. But the new lot are just as much dictators again. And
I think the Iranian one ended up in Arizona, in Paradise Valley or somewhere.
What, the Shah of Persia?
I know
he went to Paris in the first place, but he did go to the US for medical treatment. Maybe he stayed there.
Yeah.
It could be that. But that would be and really it is not, I probably wouldn't even go for that. In the, how many functional years have I got left? I'll probably be around for 20. The bad never die really young. But I've got a lot of stuff that I still need to do. There's about 5 books I want to write. I want to write some fiction. And I've got one massive undertaking that will come out as a kind of a book, but it's more than that.
And you've got everybody on YouTube gagging for your audiobooks.
Yes, they're recorded and the files are uploaded. So
has it been submitted?
Yes, and you said there was quite a delay.
A month, usually, quality control checks.
Do you know what? I think they actually just, whereas if it's in print, just on the fly-through, somebody can see there's something on the files. The computer knows there's something in print there. Print it. Doesn't matter how bad it is. But with an audiobook, they don't want a computer reading it. So some human being's got to listen to, even if the computer says, yes, there's sound on these files, they want a human listener to say, yes, that's another human being.
They probably just listen to some sections of it to hear that it's done at a right level of quality.
Yeah, but
I doubt they
don't
would
you
listen
think
to the whole thing.
The computer could do that? You would have thought. Why do they need that? Anyway, yes. By the time this is aired, I'm hopeful that the audio versions of, and I think I bring those books to life. Right?
You've done both of them.
Oh no! Well, Escape. It's not finished, but that will come out as well.
So Unforgiven Destiny is the one you've submitted.
Yes, right.
Brilliant. So the audiobook should be up by the time you're watching this. Unforgiven Destiny, description box, click down.
So. Now, what am I trying to do in Pakistan? There's quite a few important things to know there. I'm trying to escape. That's what I'm thinking. Escape, get back to London, clean up the mess. But then again, it's going to be a bigger mess than I thought because of Billy's detailed givings. But I've bought myself B class, and when I go to court, I'm not handcuffed because superior people do not escape from prison, Shaun. It's just not done. One sees the judge, and he's a fellow gentleman, and you say, "Oh, old fellow, what was it? You shot your servant?" "Ah, I don't blame you. Off you go." That's kind of the attitude that's going to happen. Nobody wealthy enough to have either bought or been given B class is likely to escape. And even the political people, there's ruthless ones, they don't do it. All their underlings are all chained up, of course. So my escort in the court, I'd send him shopping. I'd give him a grocery list and he'd wander off. And I'd walk around the courts sort of seeing what was going on. It was kind of interesting, listening in on various hearings. And some people had their sort of best visits there because there weren't any bars in between. And And of course, the big banker who was in Karachi Central Jail, he used to go to court every day. He'd arranged it in the banking court. He owned the Mehran Bank, which disappeared with 250 million US. There was so much money. And we were speaking before, weren't we, about the dangers of big money. And you can imagine having a hidden $250 million in Karachi. He had a Mercedes and an escort. He used to take him to court for his protection. And that's really the whole protection of the jail. The rangers in the towers with their rifles were not there to stop prisoners escaping. Prisoners didn't. It was to stop the enemies of those prisoners getting in to kill them. And the walls were quite high. The place was built by the British, of course. And actually had some quite fine architecture in the offices, worth looking at. Very kind of mock medieval, as you can imagine, turrets and towers and crenellations and all of that sort of thing. So this bank owner used to go to the banking court and rented an office there, and he'd see his family and people. That was enough for him. He'd built the whole house inside the prison in one of its huge... if you go onto Google Earth, you can get some scale of the thing by looking at the surrounding houses. It's a huge bit of land, probably highly valuable.
What would people have to put into Google Earth to see that?
Karachi Central Jail, that's it. Yeah, it'll come up. And over there in... the corner, you'll see a sort of fairly peaceful, blurry bit. That's where the B-class section was. Now, so I introduced myself to the political people because it seemed like they were, not only did they have interesting stories to tell, but they were kind of worth knowing. They ranged from the relatively genuine to... It's really hard to... One of them looked like... you know what his party was? Who they were supporting and Neron worshipped and had little photos of. It wasn't Benazir Bhutto's son, who was died of poisoning in Paris. These people, like the Kennedys, they're getting knocked off everywhere. That son had married a Lebanese singer, and the wife was now the head of that party. So this ruthless Ali Baba and his 40 thieves have got this very clashing picture of, quite nice-looking woman in the corner, and that's the head of their party. Now, Khalid, he seemed... Well, forget the politics of it, but just as an organizer, he seemed a nice guy, a genuine sort of person. I'd gone to him for a couple of things, and he could solve problems within the prison and wouldn't simply be having his hand out. Now, a lot of his followers, they were all in for various murders and things. For Khalid, maybe he'd ordered a few. I didn't care. And incidentally, his little house was made out of an old chapel. It was a Christian chapel that had been built within the prison. And it was kind of a weird atmosphere. They'd put all blankets and silks over the floor, and he had a kind of throne, which was the old altar. And there's sort of little niches and a couple of old pews that were at the side. So it was kind of semi-religious. I felt like I was in perhaps India visiting one of the gurus or fakirs or something like that. And I'd known him as one of them, but I needed his help that day because I'd just come back from a hanging. They sell tickets to that, more or less. And the hanging was a miserable sort of affair. There's no good ones, but I had to see at least one. The poor kid that was being executed, there was a big argument up on the gallows about his weight. And Oh, yeah, I've really felt sorry for him. He wasn't following what the discussion was because there were so many English words in there because it was the prison manual, which is all in English. And what they're really discussing is what size sandbags to put around his ankles so the drop will actually snap his neck.
Oh,
and he's up there looking like,
grief.
no, they found the person who did it. I'm going to be freed today. Yeah? What's that on my ankles? Is that good? Boom.
What kind of crimes do they hang people for?
Oh, only for murder. I think there might be a couple of other things on the statute books for death. They also have Sharia law courts to appease some group that they needed their numbers in their parliament. They agreed that there would be Sharia law. After all, it is the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. But it would be in separate courts. So they make rulings and you make sure you just don't end up there. But having, most people would think it's a terrible thing to be in a Sharia court. Yes, if you're a woman it is, but if you're a man it's not too bad at all because you need 3 witnesses to any event. It's not good enough that somebody comes in and says, I saw Shaun shoot the guy. Need 2 more of those. And they have to be of good character in a religious sense. But it's not often that... oh, yes, I forgot to say the death penalty did apply to narcotics. That was one of Benazir's little innovations to sound serious in the 80s. And just to make things fun, I was charged with this knowingly involved in Billy's little smuggling thing, being held wanted for Thailand, and also a second set of charges in the anti-narcotics court, Benazir's invention, which carried the death penalty, a duplication, which was against the Pakistan constitution, double jeopardy. But I notice, listeners, that you can be dragged into an English court twice for the same crime. Now, if they don't convict you first, they have another opportunity if they find something compelling or new evidence, which has a very broad definition, doesn't it?
So you're saying you're up for the death penalty again in Pakistan?
Yeah.
You just say it so casually. It's like people must be just mind blown. How many times have you been up for the death penalty?
Oh, only twice in a serious way. Yeah.
Only twice in a serious way.
Yeah, it's been bandied about here and there. The number of policemen have threatened me with death, I can't count. I said, all right, well, just I hope you're a good shot. Just do it already. I was never a very good shot anyway. I put up a collection of old photographs on my own channel last week, and you can see, 20-year-old David with a big .357 Magnum in his hand with hollow points, of course.
Well, do you remember in the earlier podcasts we did the series of the uselessness of guns?
Yes. Well, that was certainly it was kind of like toys because there were so many of them. But really, even to have one around, it's a gift to the burglar, isn't it? Oh, thank you for the gun. This will make this robbery more effective now that I've got this.
Let's just put it on the living room wall.
Yeah, that's true. So my diary was full of court appearances for that. But you don't get left alone. There's always somebody coming to, if you paid once, they want you to keep paying and so on. Now, to put pressure on everybody in the little B-class street, some were untouchable, but they wouldn't hurt you, Shaun, but they'd punish your servants. Now, Pakistan Steel, I'll call him, rather than Usman Farooqi. Pakistan Steel had a little guy from Swat, that's right up north, very valleyed area. He was educated. He'd been caught adjusting rewiring terrestrial satellite receiver. We used to get programs that were already stolen from the international satellites. But so they called him off the roof, and they were giving him a good beating with the chitta. That's the long leather belt that I told you had inscriptions all over it. I'll love you a long time and all of that, you know. And not just written on it. I mean, this is chiseled out. So I went to Pakistan still. I said, look, they've got your boy in there. Oh, he's always up to no good. The cheapskate wouldn't even go and get him out. Now, I knew if I went in there, you can see where this can go wrong. I go in there to stop the beating. What's going to happen?
It's your problem.
I own him now. I can stop it, but I'm paying this guy. I've started to pay him. I thought, I already refused to pay any more rent on my rooms. I will kick Billy out. I'll pay you to do that. Oh, Billy had an ace up his sleeve. I'll come back to that, but let me just finish with the poor servant who was getting beaten. So I went to Khalid down in the MQM splinter group that had the Lebanese wife as their head. Anyway, Khalid heard my story, didn't like that practice of the servants being beaten to get at the money out of others, marched over there, virtually kicked open the door of the chief's office, screamed at him in a kind of guttural Sindhi that I couldn't follow at all, tore the chitta out of the hands of the kids about it, threw it out the window, and then stormed off. And I limped out. Well, I wasn't doing the limping, but I carried out the one who'd been getting beaten. I mean, he was tiny, this guy. He showed me the welts. He wasn't good for him. So that seemed to me the best way of dealing with that. I mean, the deputy gave me a filthy look. He more or less said, oh, well, so you're with that lot, are you? And I thought, yeah, all right, work on it. I'll work from my side. And so you'd have this kind of complication. You can see how it's already complicated and it's getting more so. Now, we're about an hour into part 8 of the long-form interviews with Shaun Attwood and myself, and talking about, well, when somebody can't punish you because either you're the golden goose who's got the money or has to do things or has to perform, or is somehow really untouchable in some other way, how do you put the lien on that person? Well, in Karachi Central Jail, they knew how. They punished your servants. It's a bit like kidnapping a friend, I suppose. And that applies in many, many ways. Doesn't it? You think of the people who want something from you. Now, they can't really push you into it because you won't budge. They can't intimidate you because you'll fight back. But they know how to get to those you care about, and even some you didn't realize you cared about until the shithead started doing things. Extend the metaphor. Anyway, here's the second hour. One who'd been getting beaten. I mean, he was tiny, this guy. He showed me the welts. He wasn't good for him. So that seemed to me the best way of dealing with that. I mean, the deputy gave me a filthy look. He more or less said, oh, well, so you're with that lot, are you? And I thought, yeah, all right, work on it. I'll work from my side. And so you'd have this kind of complication. You can see how it's already complicated and it's getting more so. Now, right, there was... I think my servants, they didn't really get into any trouble. But, yeah, that's what I was going to come back to. Why was you're probably thinking, I'm sure there are many people thinking this, in a place like that where people have accidents, very often, frequently fatal, why wasn't that happening to Billy Green? Well, because when I was last at court, Jeremy, the vice consul for the British High Commission in Karachi. They don't have embassies in countries that we used to own. They're called high commissions. Just a little reminder that we're still up there. It's a joke, but there we are. Jeremy from there, he'd been sent some money on my behalf, and he made a big cloak and dagger thing of having an envelope. I said, Jeremy, the more you look it around everywhere during a handover, the more people pay attention to this. So just give me the thing. He said, by the way, be careful of old Will Power over there. I said, what, he's all bluster. No, it's not that. He said that he'll testify against you if things aren't going to go his way. Ooh. He already came to us and asked to see the local police liaison, if that would help his case at all. I said, well, Jeremy, will it help his case from your point of view? No, we don't care less. We know everything here and we don't care. There's nothing we can do anyway. Rightio. So if by chance poor old Billy slipped in the shower, somebody would think I had something to do with that, because and that would make it, that would add another layer of complication to my case, wouldn't it? Because I would be paying not only to be freed from something I didn't do, but also for a supposed murder that I may or may not have instigated. See, people think that crime is very straightforward from film and television, where you have something, you're doing something, your competition you kill, your informers you kill. But you've seen enough of it, Shaun. It doesn't work that. If you can't outwit people, or at least match their cunning with the guile of another kind, things just get worse.
It's like a chessboard.
It is. So getting rid of, I was forced to keep Billy under control. I couldn't live with him. That would have been just too much. But I found him not a bad place to live. I noticed some of the English crooks that were there had fallen to pieces completely in this system. It just didn't go in with anything they knew. Now, this Mason, the American, he'd gone completely absorbed into it. He used to run around in a shalwar kameez. He learned very good Sindhi, as well as Urdu. He used to write poetry in Sindhi. I had to admire the little rat, because he'd done what a guy called Dean Reed had done back in Thailand. If you remember the things that happened in Thailand, there was an American there who was helping me, fleeced me directly for 50,000 and more from friends. But, and I've always said that perhaps he did help me because he gave me hope when there was none. Now, Mason wasn't anything at that level, but he was of that style, that kind of young guy you meet sometimes who, okay, this is strange, but I'll embrace it. I'll learn it. I mean, you must have done some of that yourself.
You have to adapt to the environment, don't you? Otherwise you perish, because there's a language, there's a body language, there's guards rules, there's gang rules, and you come in day one and all that is in your face and it's completely alien to you. So unless you're doing the prison walk and speaking the lingo and trying to fit in, then anything that stands out gets brutalized. Well,
I suppose too, tell me if I'm wrong, once you found yourself in the Arizona prison, you had to observe and then create the Shaun Attwood that was the survivor in the Arizona prison. May not have been you exactly, elements of you, most certainly, but it was, I'm guessing, a character that you had to form, the one who helped with the guy's writing, the one who gave them tips on business advice, perhaps because of your stock market experience, the one who was useful, the one who was liked, the one that people used to know. Yeah, Shaun comes around and does whatever. I'm sure if somebody played a mean guitar, it'd probably find, a way in there.
Whatever skill set you've got becomes your currency.
Yes, I guess it does. So this American guy kind of I think he was always a bit somebody who could kind of smooth in there. He was caught with a couple of girls with a few kilos each. Very strange place to go, especially with women. The women who got arrested really stood out. We came to know in there of Tatiana, a Russian girl. She came from Krasnodar, which is a little bit south in what was, well, no, it was it then Russia by then? Yes, it was. USSR had gone. But when it opened up a bit, she'd met a Nigerian student. Shall we call him a student? We shall. I'm sure he did study things. And being a good wife, she found herself doing a heroin run for the Nigerian husband, who had connections in their big hangout up there is Rawalpindi, but they don't like using Islamabad airport. But still, she was caught at Karachi airport, and she had a young child. She thought somehow that, and you know what's worse, the customs and the officials there, they think all Russian girls are called Tatiana. And secondly, they're all prostitutes, because that's what they're doing here. They thought she was a prostitute, so they messed around with her and poked around on her bags. And a couple of kilos later, she's in the women's section. Now, I went to visit her there. Not her particularly, but I'd met a guy called Robbie the Scot. Robbie the Scot was accused, and I'd read about his case a bit in the paper when I was there. He was accused of some fraudulently arranging bribes for the Gwadar oil and gas pipeline. Gwadar's down on the coast there next to Iran. So it was expected that he would turn up. He in fact said that he was just unlucky being at the Hyatt Hotel when some City of London police had visited and seen him there. Not exactly knew him of old, and he really wasn't a conventional fraudster in the sense. Okay, any banking documents that Robbie would give you would be treated more of artworks than actual genuine documents. But the whole thing got a bit messy when one of the loans was guaranteed by a European bank that sent a fax to confirm something. But people don't remember. Think of fax headers. I know faxes are just about gone with the wind, but they're sometimes used when there's a signature involved, aren't they? And the receiving machine will, the sending machine will have a very fine print at the top of what it was. And in this case, instead of showing a bank in Zurich, it showed the Pearl Continental Hotel in downtown Karachi. Yeah. Something picked up by the City of London police and referred to their colleagues there. So he came in. And how did I know all about it? Well, I got around a bit anyway, but the young American kid got released. And one of the deputy chiefs called me up one day, said, David, didn't you owe me money? No, not really. No. Look, have a look out there. And I saw a kind of ginger-headed, portly guy there, Anglo, of course. Yes? Rich. With the newspapers. I want 25,000 or Bundward. Uh-huh. What do you want me to do? Well, I'll talk to him. Put something in for yourself. Yeah. And if he doesn't have money or can't get it, well, he'll be sweeping. And the kids, they had nothing to sweep, really. So they had a bunch of sticks and they'd be sweeping the dirt, just the ground. So I went over to Robbie and I said, look, we're going to pretend that we're having a heated discussion and you're going to look like you're upset and tearing your hair out. I've been asked for some ridiculous amount of money. And he said, I've been here a year in Pakistan. I know how it goes. I'm ready for all of that. Okay. I'll pay $5,000 or something like that. Look, 5,000 rupees is about like 50 pounds or something. That's what we're talking about here. Let's forget you've been here a year, but in this jail, local currency. And I think I mentioned it once before and talking about Afghanistan. Even there, all your dealings should be local currency. The moment you start bringing in euros or dollars, they put you in a different league. All the figures change. You're just a fool running around with foreign money. And foreign money is printed from heaven and rains down upon us poor people. That's how it's supposed to work. And that's what you're going to do. Anyway, we played this charade, and I looked over at the chief, and he went with sweeping gestures. That's what he'll be doing. Anyway, I went back to him. We settled up for the equivalent of about £120 today and a lot of talk tomorrow, which was good enough to get into B class. But I didn't fancy that job, so I did it badly. Not so badly that he'd hate me forever, but badly enough that he'd try and find somebody better. And while I was at it, I set him up against the other deputy chief that I was in trouble for getting involved in the beating of the servant. I said, he wants your job. And he's going to get it. So, I kept those two busy for a while. But things didn't go. I was kind of finding my way around there and going to court every 6 weeks for, an hour or something. The first lawyer just ran off with some money. Another lawyer I met was introduced to in my little B-class street. His name was Zahor Bruch. And I kind of liked the Bruchy people, so... and he knew Nurjan, who was there at the time. Yeah, in fact, Nurjan didn't know I'd been arrested and came out, in his usual flowing white robes with his gold chains everywhere. David, no. Yes, no. Anyway, we did that until it became silly, and then a bit of hugging, and and then I found out, how he was living in his own kind of ruthless way in there, but he was a respected chief. But I didn't ask him to do anything for me. I knew better than that. When you're in that kind of situation, figure it out yourself. Even don't panic. You're not going anywhere in a hurry. And in case I forget to say it later, anybody arrested in India or Pakistan, it's very simple. The law says, and it's unchangeable, that if your case isn't finished in 2 years, you get bail, even if you're a foreign devil. It has to be granted. The worst massacre murderers have been given bail after 2 years. Your court case will never finish in that time remotely, so put your feet up. Read a few books. Don't splash your money all over town. Certainly don't give it to lawyers. Rana Shamim is a lawyer in Karachi if you ever need one, though I think he's a judge now. He was quite good.
Didn't you say that the higher class prisoners go to the court unchained?
Yes.
Were you tempted to just get in that situation and walk out?
I was, in a way. I'd go to court and I'd think, can be done like that. But I remembered where I was, and I remembered lessons from Lebanon. I thought, if I say to somebody there, come and pick me up, they will. And they'll say, oh, you missed the turn here to the airport. Where am I going? Huh? Where do you think I'm going, Shaun, when somebody's picked me up from the courtroom and I'm a wanted man?
Not a nice place.
I'm going to somewhere expensive. That's where. Very expensive accommodation. So I realized that also I knew I was going to win the case. So there wasn't Bill Schenkmans of this world have got no pull whatsoever in that town. Everything is local. The jail was its own kind of local world. But I really, so I met Zohar Baloch, who'd been, if you want to get somebody arrested in India and Pakistan, you file an FIR. That's a first incident report. That allows the police to come and annoy them and interview them over. And if things don't go well, they'll send them off to jail to get themselves bailed out. And if you don't like somebody, that's what you do. If you don't want to pay your lawyer, you file a report saying, he swindled me or something, which was what happened to Zohar Baloch. Though he probably did do the thing that annoyed one of his clients. And he was under a bit of a cloud for falsifying some court records in his cases. But I liked him. He was sort of friendly. I didn't trust him, but he was enough of an outsider to the Karachi lawyer scene. I've been trying, while I'm talking, I'm trying to think of the name of the most corrupt lawyer in the whole town back then. But there was one who owned stacks of judges. He drove around in, wasn't a Rolls Royce, but very big Mercedes, near illiterate. That's the thing that upset the other lawyers. Not that he was paying off every judge, but that he just wasn't one of them. I could barely read the court documents. If you had him, you're likely to walk, but it would cost a fortune. So that wasn't a way to go. I thought, I'll just hold back there and see what my judge is like. And he was good. I kind of we got along well enough. He eventually gave me a legitimate B-class court order. Not that it actually did any good. I still didn't entirely avoid the money thing. But while Robbie was in, he went over to the women's prison and met Tatiana and formed a bit of a bond. And he decided that all of the foreigners, anyway, who'd found themselves on this double jeopardy thing, that should be challenged, because the Constitution clearly said you can't be tried for the same thing twice. So we took it to the Sindh High Court for a ruling on that. Plenty of people had been finished their sentences but still couldn't go anywhere. And these anti-narcotics courts didn't really exist in the sense that there was only one or two venues for them, and they'd been taken over by the new anti-terrorist court, which had its own problems. So a rent raise came up, and I was really limiting. I wouldn't play along entirely. I suppose I was just getting grumpy. I was depressed enough of having all this happen anyway, but I started to see a kind of a weakness in the structure here. And I thought, I don't know, I sometimes do this to myself, Shaun. I thought, what is it about this bun board thing anyway? and what about these people who had disappeared from here? You never hear. Where do they really go? So before I ended up moving out of my street into a slightly different one, and had a couple of nights, and I wondered why this. I thought, yeah, sure, they want some more money. I thought I'll pay them a bit and get back to where I was. Then ended up spending a couple of nights with the most weird people. Can you imagine? There's a young medical student who's in there on some silly thing. I don't know. Didn't get along with the policeman. He got thrown in there. But he's a medical student, so he's in a kind of a B-class thing. But there's one other person in the cell, and this is a fat-headed, gabbing half-wit. And he's a policeman. And because he's a policeman, they give him, as a courtesy, a bit of B-class. Not the top B-class, but whatever. So the poor medical student, if you know other languages or you start to pick them up, be careful admitting to it, because this fathead would have been in my head all night. The medical student was St. David, he's eating my brain. What's he talking about? Oh, he's telling me about nights at the station and how they got somebody in and hung them upside down. And then there were some prostitutes and what he did to them. I want to die. I can't take that. Maybe he's in the employ of, but no, he was just a natural idiot. And then I couldn't take him either. And I moved to a kind of a room with a really wreck of a Danish guy that was ending a sentence. But we exchanged things, notes and people we knew. And I met somebody else. I can't even remember how I came across him, who wasn't in B class. Very nervous German guy. And this was Matthias. And he'd been through Afghanistan, Pakistan. He got caught with a lot of hash once. And this was a hash case as well. But I tried to draw him out of that, but he was probably, he'd asked around about me and he probably thought, no, this could be more danger than it might be, because I was kind of going against them a bit at this stage. But I was still having my Sunday lunches, and the house that this banker had built was kind of like a conventional English suburban house in a way, but it had manicured lawns and air conditioning and its own satellite connections, and it was just a house. But it was very strange for it to be there. And the Sunday lunches were well catered for, and as I think I mentioned before, all in English. But all that came to an end when I could see I was being really targeted there. The case was droning on, and I was going to win. And I couldn't really do much about anything. My communications were better. So I had Carl, who was a Canadian villain, come over. And you'd think I'd know better by now. Carl, what? Look, a couple of things. I want you to go to the court. Zahor Baluch, the lawyer that was inside, is now outside. I've given him some money, but I want you to go to the court and see if he's really making bail applications for me. Now, when you finish that, I want you to go to London. You get my keys by going down the Mews. It's under where the rain is. And there's some codes I'll need you to remember. I've written them out for you. Now, roll them up in a little tube of paper, because you'll stick that in a cigarette or something. I mean, I don't smoke. Carl, look, follow this. You've got to hide that piece of paper. It's the instructions on how to get into safety deposit boxes all around Scandinavia. Right. Now, if you're thinking, is Carl the right person for this job? Maybe not. But it would do what I say, and he wouldn't steal from me, and he was quite brave. So these are three good things, aren't they? The fact that he's a bonehead when it comes to the subtleties of that. I mean, you must have found yourself, there's quite a gulf between some kind of crooked business, let's just say, might involve market manipulation or some banking fraud, and the huge bulk of the people you're likely to meet in jail. Their crimes are not really planned. They're often domestic. They mask what's really a history of sporadic and half-witted violence by saying, oh, no, my thing is I'm a high-end burglar. Well, but you stole a fucking gold-braided knickers on your way out. You're what? High-end burglar, yeah. I sent Carl off on that mission, and the reporting day came and went. No news. I was thinking all sorts of things. I thought, well, what rule could he have broken? Nah, he wouldn't have done that. I gave him that number for emergencies, and he'd only ring it from... He got to Scandinavia and to Stockholm, and I'd left a few things lying around. So he's got into my safety deposit box, which is fine. He's taken out some cargo, and there's about I suppose he meant to have left. I don't really know to this day. I was so enraged I didn't follow up on it. But the 2 kilos of coke there that he's got. Now, you've got to meet somebody later on. And I said, he works for a newspaper. He gets back about 6. He's like clockwork. He's he's a raging junkie. He will always be at home for his 7 o'clock fix. So if he's not, he's dead. But don't ring the number. The reason I've got it there is if you've got to warn him against something. Did I say, Carl, not to ring that number? Don't ring that number. Why? Well, you don't anyway, but the fact is, Billy Green here has been blabbing about everything, so I've got to assume he said something about Scandinavia. And it doesn't take much to set them off over there. There's only a certain number of people involved in different levels of business. Anyway, just don't ring that damn number. Knock, knock. Got 2 kilos here. Nobody home. So he has left the 2 kilos with. Oh no, he didn't. He was sensible enough not to take it with him. Night 1. Where does he put it? Left it in the bank vault where it was supposed to be. Hidden it in a hotel room. No. You know, hotel corridors have got big, heavy bits of furniture. You can leave them up. Nobody's going under there for a while. It'll do for overnight. No. A railway locker. I mean, people, you know this, don't you, about railway lockers? They get cleared every day. I mean, the second most dangerous lockers in the world, the more dangerous ones are airport lockers. Not that you'll even find them anymore, but they used to exist. So, arrangements are made. He was given some money that was owed to me, about 75,000. It was 750,000 Swedish krona, so 75,000 pounds. Heads off with that. Is supposed to bring the coke back the next day. Goes to his hotel room. Swamp. Police in there. Oh, by the way, what's he done with the key to the locker? It was just sitting in his suitcase. What's the point of hiding something in a locker if you're going to keep the key with you? This is a man who quite successfully robbed a few banks, quite peaceably. He wouldn't shoot anybody, but they didn't know that. Shut the security screen. So, well, anyway, I guess he just was an idiot. I remember him smiling at me one time later on, saying, "Oh, I did save that other 8 ounces, and I sent it off to our friends in Australia." What do you mean, Carl? You don't know anything about sending a letter, let alone... Oh, no, it was a very good idea. And he looked around conspiratorially. Shaun, I've hidden it in a little statue. I'll never look in there. Carl, since statues were invented, they've been hiding things in there. When pottery was in Mesopotamia, somebody hid his shekels in there. Because it never made it. But worse than that, Carl had never made it. He was held under a Swedish law. You can hold somebody incommunicado for 3 months. I think that's still the case today. It certainly was then.
What the hell?
Yeah, you're not allowed to talk to anybody. You can have a lawyer, but the lawyer can't give you any documents. He can only read them to you. If you want to visit family, you can only do it in police headquarters. They'll take you from the jail to police headquarters and they'll sit there while you talk to the family.
So they can hold you for 3 months on suspicion?
Yeah, and have it extended. An old pal there from Christiania, which we haven't come to, some other series, he was held for 22 months in solitary. And when you exercise, you go out one at a time so you can't talk to each other. Wow. And into a big circular yard with kind of orange segments like that. So you have one little yard to yourself and they have a tapping code.
Great.
Yeah. So it might be all huggy and friendly and, IKEA, but they certainly know how to treat their prisoners. They used to have them wear masks. The entire sentence. You're running around, well, not in your cell, but as you moved about the prison, you had to wear this mask with eye holes in it. And the old church there used to have, the pews had very long wooden things so you couldn't see the guy praying next to you. No, they didn't want criminals mixing together because it would make them more criminal. Who would have thought that? Anyway, so that was Carl. That's gone. That's dead. He's destroyed. What wasn't destroyed by Billy Green has been ground into dust by Carl. And that, ladies and germs, is because I didn't follow my own rule book, which says if you've got anything hidden and something's going to expire and you send somebody to stop rental not being paid or deposit boxes not being set up for another year, you run a huge risk of making things worse. Having said that, it's a hard decision to make. I've got a bank account down at the BBVA in Knightsbridge I just can't get to because the documents for that are all gone. I even dug up the real person on whose documents it was based. Lined it out. I said, there's money there. You want to go get it? Yeah. 20 years ago? No, thanks. Okay. So we're back in Pakistan and things are not going really well. And I'm now in an argument with that. My kind of resources are dried up. I'm not broke, but I'm starting to have to be a bit thoughtful how long this is going to take and who I have to pay. So I'm not bringing in the last of it until I know exactly who to pay off. So it means I'm not paying any of these people. So I think I was living with the old Danish guy. I was too. Down in a sort of sub-B class. Door opens at night. Guards come in. I don't like the look of them. I mean, I don't like looking at the best of times, but I didn't like their manner. It was like they had a very specific job to do. And they lifted up something in the corner and my phone was there. But I'd already paid for that phone about 7 times. No, we found a phone. It was like, what was the policeman's name in Casablanca? Saying, I'm shocked to find there's gambling going on in here. He says in Rick's Casino, this guy's I'm shocked that you've got a phone, a terrible thing. They don't exist in here, don't you know that? All right, where's this going? So I end up in the bund ward that night, led away. I thought, wow, they really do want their money. Now, I'm handcuffed by a guy that I've already paid off. And, actually, I didn't see him the first night there. I was just thrown into the cell. He pulled that stunt the next day. But I got talking with the guys. And you can imagine there's no cigarettes down there. So they were all desperate for a smoke. And they were working out little ways to, and one of them had a match poked into the mud brick wall that he was saving for the smoke that never turned out. And there was a trustee working down there as well. You can imagine what he was like. And there's sort of groans coming down from the other cells. So in the morning, I get called out. I'm thinking, good, I've got somebody to negotiate here with. And it was this fathead that was in charge of the bund board. And, and he looked at me and thought, not really, I can't go too far there. I said, listen, whatever you're thinking of doing, and I was sort of a bit lost there because I was going to threaten them with the embassy, but they knew too well that the British embassy or the High Commission doesn't give a toss what happens. They're not terribly frightened of that, but a little bit of that. I said, I've got passports for 7 countries. Well, that confused him. Is that right? No. Anyway, all he managed to do was he put the handcuffs on behind me, and the kind you can't pick. Not easily. They have a kind of conical tube down them, very old-fashioned ones, museum pieces they were. And I thought I was going somewhere, but I wasn't going. I was just led back to my cell. And then the guy said, no, that's day 1. You're 24 hours in handcuffs. How do I use the toilet? I said, with help. Okay. Lunch was brought around. Very gritty bread, flatbread, and equally gritty beans. Presumably, if you don't stay down there. This is not a place for people who've got means or any resources. But these poor people who've just been arrested are getting their introduction. You know, on arrival at the prison, they'd be the old hand that pinched my money that day. He kind of sort them out and tell the boss, good one here. He's being polite to me. This one's got an education. Oh, look, family out there. Really not prepared for any of it. And they just belt them to pieces. And I could see the trustees who were doing the belting because they're too lazy to do it, the guards. I was worn out from hitting this guy, I just couldn't. And he was hysterical. I mean, he was hurt, of course. I could understand that, but it was just a nightmare. I think he was gone by that afternoon. He got his family to stump up the money, whatever it was. But what to do with me? I get brought before a slightly higher deputy governor, and he was looking, saying, we can't take your money anymore. I said, well, that's convenient because I'm not going to give you any. We can't do anything with you. Yeah. It's a very ambiguous word, Shaun. We can't do anything. It means something is going to be done with you, but it won't be good. Okay. A couple of guys are running around and they've seen me then come up, and I'm rapid firing off messages for Robbie the Scot and other people, get Khaled and get somebody else. But, when somebody's under such a cloud, nobody wants to know you. I was thrown into a van, bumped along a country road somewhere. Oddly enough, I did have a few seconds to get some of my bedding and stuff from my room over there. So that was bundled up like a huge thing, and went into the back of the van with me. Didn't know where I was headed. I knew I was going north. That's all you could tell from the sun. Guards didn't want to know. And I was taken to Hyderabad prison. Now, there's two Hyderabad's, one in India and one in Pakistan. The one in Pakistan is about 100 kilometers north of Karachi. Very old prison, another built by the Raj. And where was I taken there? The Bund ward, the closed ward. But it wasn't run in the same way. I mean, Karachi was... I'm going to say just a grinder, a meat grinder. People would come in and they'd get whatever they could with them. I'd had officers from staff from Karachi who were really, you could tell they were educated. One quite senior one was very apologetic. He said, David, you know what I've been sent here to ask you? I said, I know what you've been sent. But I speak English very well, so that's why they asked me. And yes. Well, I don't want to even say it. It's too embarrassing, I said, well, look, there's a portrait of the founder of the country on the banknote. That 100 is... He's not talking about hundreds. I was just not talking about hundreds, but, some excuse. Money's coming, lost, too far away from home, all of that. Now, but... So it's a little bit different in Hyderabad. The bund was definitely closed. You don't see anyone. It's very dark. The cell I was giving didn't have any natural light. All I could see by the time I turned a couple of corridors was a glow from a sort of third level reflection. And then that was it. Nothing more. The next day... so quiet too, and then it was a bit like that silence of Papillon's Island where it's in solitary. Not as quiet as all that. You'd hear the the Badashi coming around to refill this mudka, it's called. It's a big jar where all the water is. He'd be topping that up so that the dead insects could float to the top. And you didn't have the little bowl or whatever, it didn't quite go through the bars to get to it properly. So you'd scoop up some and have to kind of tip it through to get any there. Not really enough to wash. But oddly enough, this very polite, well brought up guard had been transferred because he was useless to them down in Karachi. He wouldn't play along with that game. And he'd ended up there, and he said he had a couple of chairs brought, and we were sitting in the sun in this quiet courtyard of this place. And, the governor here, he wants 25,000 US. And we had this, I mean, how many times have I said that figure sitting in this chair? This is your corrupt official starting point. US dollars and 25,000 of them. It might be like 888. It's the Indo-European version of the Chinese lucky number or something like that. Well, I said, you're going to have to give him a lot of stories. And it's actually true. I can't communicate with anybody here anyway. Tell him it's coming when I get to my friends. Not that much. He can have 1,000 or something. Oh, and by the way, I need my bedding and everything like that. Oh, I don't know. He won't like. I said, don't tell him. But they all right. Yeah. So I got that, and I was still back in this sort of dungeony, lightless room, but there was enough of a glow during the day to lay out my little eider-down duvet mattressy things, and I could put my shoes by my side, and I had a few bits of paper that I could make a path, because the floor was just earth in this thing. It wasn't even concrete. I suppose if you were patient, you could actually chip your way through the whole thing. Anyway, and that was it. I just got used to the idea of nothingness. And it was somehow, for a while anyway, a bit of a holiday. I wasn't being chased by Bill and the boys. I was not having to pay strict attention to some smuggling protocol. I wasn't having to do any of this. This place was, in fact, the guy who ran it wanted to be everybody's pal. They weren't going anywhere until they settled a score with the bosses. And I wasn't going anywhere till I paid up. The well-spoken one came back and was almost in tears, saying, "Oh, he's punished me so much for me giving your bedding to you." But that was it for me. I was happy. I thought about all the things I didn't have time to think about, and organized my... I wouldn't say happy. This is probably the wrong word. I mean, when you've been arrested in a place where the law could be anything anyway, and then been disappeared to a jail, nobody knew I was there. Nobody knew where it was. I was listed for court twice, and there's just no show. And the judge said, "Well, where is he?" "Oh, we don't know." "Well, I sent the order down to Karachi Central Jail, and he's not here." "Well, we don't know. Nobody knows anything."
Was it weird to not have anything to do and just to spend time with your own thoughts?
I'd thought of what did people do. There's a few old prison diaries I'd read when I was young of what. So you always get your questions answered sooner or later, Shaun, don't you? People who were smarter than me. There was a mathematician arrested by the Nazis who used to do theorems or something in his head, but I ran out of things to do quite quickly on that. But I did imagine I designed a house inside my head. And to this day, over 20 years later, I can tell you every floorboard in that house I designed in my head, every paint combination, what the bench tops look like, what cutlery and crockery were in there, what the bedding was like, what fabric it was made of, what the tiles on the roof. It's a living picture in my mind. It was so detailed.
Wow.
That I can dream at night and imagine I'm wandering around this house.
Didn't Hannibal Lecter do something similar?
I can't remember. What did he say that he did in his mind? I don't know.
With his classical music on, he was drawing.
Oh yes, that's right.
But he also wasn't the part where he like went into rooms of a house and stuff.
Oh no, I must have missed that. But yes, it would make sense. I started work on a boat design, and also you run through the bits of history, and do some what ifs. What if the atomic bomb had been invented later or earlier? Would it be more dangerous? What if Franz Ferdinand had not been shot? Would there be World War I? All that kind of stuff. If Alexander the Great had gone on to conquer India, would it mean that Western civilization would have spread more? But as I was kind of starting to run out of, starting to worry a bit. Well, this could be it. I know it won't be, so don't worry about it. But just didn't seem to be anything else. It was as lost, I think, as anybody from our part of the world can be. Not just arrested, but in a strange place. Not just in the regular strange jail, but in the one you don't know anything about. Not just the jail there, but within a closed section of it.
Did you have an exercise routine?
Yeah, I did that. That was my clock.
What was it?
I had to, the usual things, push-ups, sit-ups, nothing, because I wasn't eating very much. The food would be brought around in a bucket, and because they couldn't open the door, they were very hard to open because they rusted up, they didn't get used much. They had to put some rain pipe guttering through the bars and pour the sloppy dal down and you'd be given a bit of bread and you'd catch it in that.
You catch it in your hands?
Yeah, you catch it
wow.
in your hands, yeah. And that was it. But,
was there a lot of insects down there?
Oh yeah, plenty. I did a bit of ethnobiology there and checking out what's the study of insects particularly, I forget. But I did befriend somebody there. They sent some guy down to see me to encourage me to pay up. And the most unusual person, his name was Byron, I'll think of it in a minute. He was the third generation English leftovers from the Raj. His parents had been there in the 20s and even up until, and stayed on in the 40s. And he was a kind of ginger nut, a redhead, really. Had a fine old colonial style moustache, would have been about 38, 40 at the time I met him. Had freckly skin, but he grew up and was born in Pakistan. He would have been entitled to a British passport once, but they pulled that particular rug out from what are about 200,000 English-looking Pakistanis that have no local DNA in them, but they've just been left careless in packing when leaving the empire. They didn't take them with them, or they had children and they had children and met another European girl or an English girl and married there in the 50s or 60s or something. And yeah, there's so many of those. Anyway, it was perhaps the wrong choice of person. It was good for me because he brought me very humble but little bits of food every day. But he said, look, the governor's asked me to get money, but look at me, I never do anything. Everything I've got has been through hunger strikes. And he had the telltale scars on his lip there where he'd sewn his lips together so they couldn't force feed him.
Wow. And
he said to me, oh, why don't you go on hunger strike? They'll let you out of here. But the slightly friendly other Bundward guard said, look, do you realise what that involves? We're supposed to take you out and beat you every day, 3 times a day. I said, yeah, well, I'm not rushing into any hunger strikes. I know, I kind of put up with that. I heard his story, and it was a long one, an interesting one, about his parents and upbringing and background. But I was content to stay there.
We should probably leave it as a mystery as to what happens next, because we're at 2 hours.
Well, I at least got to say what changes.
Yeah, go for it.
In the Bund ward, everything's looking hopeless. I've got no contact with anybody. When there's a rush at my door, that rusty gate is prized open. The governor wants to see you, or the superintendent's the word they use. Well, I think I know what's coming there. And I think it's just because it's a stronger pitch for money. I get taken to there. All the guards are being very respectful towards me. I don't know whether this is another gambit. And I'm led up these old colonial era town curled stairways and into an office which opens up. And there, the prison superintendent's smiling at me in a way which is, everything's nice. And who steps forward, surrounded by armed guards, their own rifles at the ready? It's His Lordship, Noor John Magsy, freed recently on bail, heard through his own network that I'd been disappeared to Hyderabad, came down there with his men to either find out what's happening with David or somebody will have to answer for it. And he'd brought a cake. So we had tea and cake with Noor John and the prison governor, who is fawning and being polite. Because after all, Noor John could just as easily say, kill every one of them. He had 30 men outside. He didn't know what he was going to face. So he'd come prepared.
Wow.
And, virtually said, what do you want? I'll do it.
My God.
So, travellers, don't be afraid to go to exotic places, but make sure you're friendly with some honourable people from the tribal lands. You never know when you might need them. And you can.
If you want to know what happens next, tune in for part 9. And please support David. His YouTube channel link is down there in the description box below the video. And
I'm actually putting out some videos at the moment. And you will have answered the one of how do you collect the ransom money next time.
We've got links to his books, Escape, massive detail about the escape from death row in Thailand, and
even more in An Unforgiving Destiny.
Even more in Unforgiving Destiny, which should be available as an audiobook by the time you get this, if Amazon don't reject David's voice.
Well, yes, I don't think they care about the content so much. I think as long as they recognize me as human and not a machine.
If you've enjoyed this, please put a comment or a question for David in the comment section below. Huge thank you to all the people who've donated on Patreon, PayPal, Just Giving to enable us to produce podcasts at the studio level quality like we are today with our camera crew and James
very
and Joe.
Very professional, yes. Lavish almost, yes.
And now we're all going to go on our lunch break, so...
Okay then, well, I'll see you on the other side, as they said in, what was that movie? The Town. A good villain hold-up movie, that one. So we rather rapidly fade out on part 8 of the long-form interviews with Shaun Attwood and myself. Ending, I think, talking about The Town, quite a good robbery, city heist movie with Ben Affleck, and, of course, set in Boston. There were a lot of the Afflecks involved in Boston-type things, and it, of course, had a name for the crooks in there, because they've got such good crook history. Goes way back, Irish, mostly. The kind of thing where the Irish are either criminals or cops, or a mix of both. In the top 10 robbery movies, Heat is always up there, isn't it? And The Usual Suspects. And, you know what, I've seen a recent list that includes Baby Driver. I don't really see how that is. It doesn't even a passing salute to any sort of realism. But do we care about that anymore? No, not much. Credibility, yes. But that doesn't even have to be real. Isn't that crazy? We can be credible now, but not real. On that thought, I'll close now, and I've got something in mind. Let's see what it is.